But in today's discussion, I'd like to focus on my 5 engaging characteristics, which are at core my research. Basically, my research is to investigate the interactivity between the audience and the computer-based interactive artworks that are exhibited in public spaces, which are not primarily used for art purpose. Through the research, an analytical framework consisting of these 5 engaging characteristics was developed. This analytical framework is a conceptual tool allowing pre-planned and post-evaluation state of engagement to the interactive artworks. And the aim of the research is to enhance the engagement and further lead to a fulfilling and meaningful interactive experience. So to begin with, I'd like to discuss a little bit about background about how these 5 engaging characteristics was identified. The first, literature reviews, and several informal field observations in the MRT stations. This early research stage laid the foundation of the research, and also uncovered the 3 initial engaging characteristics: transfer, accessibility, and challenge. The second, pilot studies. The purpose of pilot study was to test the initial hypothesis and the viability of the research method which will be used in our case study in the MRT stations. And through the study, the characteristics play was identified. After completion of the second case study, a very important characteristic, incentive, was discerned.
A much better distinction, which actually, in play, you don't have a winner and a loser, whereas in games you do. So there was a similarity, but I think that was quite a big difference. But it was also something I noticed again at that conference, that there was a point where we were asked to do these drawings, and then we were asked to swap into one another's drawings, and I became intensely aware of how much I had to try and actually learn the other person's set of rules that they kind of created themselves, or maybe they weren't even aware of those rules, but in order, I mean, some people would just go along and they would just embellish what was already there, and you know, that kind of made sense, but there wasn't really much of an interaction, it didn't seem to me. It wasn't really, I mean, there wasn't any co-authorship going on there at all. But there was something quite respectful that I thought was interesting. But nonetheless, the people that actually did really engage with what they were looking at were the ones that actually did sort of unearth some of the purpose that the previous, you know, people have been drawing with. And I, again, I sort of was aware of how that suddenly turned into a game. So it had initially been play, but it suddenly turned into a game. So when you get 2 people, suddenly that kind of thing, you know, happens. And I think, you know, we can see that as well. For example, with you know, we are a family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where you can see people, in a sense, generating their own rules,
yeah,
which is part of this process of
yeah,
transfer,
mm-hmm,
isn't it? Really, where they become the authors of the work, which is one of the fantastic things about play, generally as well, is that it allows people to feel as though they have autonomy,
mm-hmm,
which is one of the things I mean psychologists see as being one of the most fundamental things to human happiness.
Can I ask you a question leading on from that? I'm interested in the poetry loop.
Oh, okay.
And I understood with the poetry loop because it didn't seem to have an incentive the following full week.
Mm-hmm.
Because it didn't have that initial incentive.
Right.
But 2 things I was interested about that was first thing I was interested in knowing how does a viewer participant get to know that they can send a text. Something must.
Because I told it.
So if there's people wandering around there, how do they know to text? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, there are text number displayed on the bulletin board. But did you notice that they already run too fast?
Yeah, okay.
So the interview has a very report that they usually just quick go through. They wouldn't pay attention.
So it's a kind of weak incentive.
Yes, very weak.
Because I was thinking, if I was looking at that and I mean, obviously, this is just my complete initial observation, but I would have thought that's an interest to me from my background. Yes, in contemporary art, that seems like quite a successful interactive experience because the viewer participant is genuinely involved in it in the sense of actually putting a thought in their head or a bit of language from them out actually onto it. And so in some ways it's quite empowering, or it's making almost like a representation of the viewer participant. I mean, it's just an observation. That's
I'm desperate to know what they say as well. Like, you know, what are these text messages? What's the research behind that?
I was interested if anything can go.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's I'm just saying from my because I would say from my perspective, it's about how an interactive experience can make what it allows a viewer participant to think about themselves in relation to a wider social body. That would be the criteria for me.
The environment, the time of day, what's happening.
I think you mentioned that the environment is really important, and this is a really particular environment where people are rushing through. I think if this was in a gallery situation, yes, of course, it would be very easy to interact with it. And I think if it was in probably an airport, it would probably work because people have time to see that on the way. But just because it's a subway station, people are just kind of rushing from train to train, and they also do the same journey every day. But I think you're right, it has the potential to be a really successful piece, but the weaknesses in the incentive.
Yeah, I think my question would kind of lead on to that, because I'm interested in June, when you do your research, and Rico was asking you, how did you come up with this analytical framework? Why did you choose these 5 elements?
Right.
Is it at all in consideration to how these works are commissioned? What is the purpose for these kind of interactive artworks to be located in kind of hubs of public transport? Is there any clarity at all on why have these artworks in the first place? What is the purpose of having these artworks?
What is the purpose?
Therefore, then it makes sense, how do we draw a framework to analyze whether these works are working well or not? I think it has to be in relation to certain set of objectives that are set out in the first place. And I'm also interested in what Jim was saying about authenticity, because to me, the realm of digital technology is a form, for me, of disembodiment or a displaced embodiment, because maybe it's just I feel distant to it. So, how is authenticity defined then within that realm of digital experience?
Very point about one theory, I think it's about the experience is great, but without reflection, intellectually goes nowhere. And it's experience that is reflected on, that leads to understanding, even if that understanding is just for oneself. But I think that's where for me is the resonance with embodied knowledge, is the organism reaching out into the world and encountering something in the world creates the life force, it creates the intelligence. It's that kind of call and response that gives us the energy to move on, which I think is again very significant in Reiko's idea of the exploratorium in San Francisco, isn't it? It's a museum for science, you've worked in it, Reiko, but where the experience is set up in order to take you deeper into the world somehow. Yeah. One of the challenges I think of an MRT space, transport spaces, the pre-definition of that space as something to go through without experience, in a sense. To move from A to B, but to blank out what the space between A and B happens to be. One of the motives of of transport systems is to actually get you through the system and not linger, because otherwise you're creating a kind of problem. So it's a hugely challenging space.
So there's a reason, so there's a reason why play, the characteristic of play, is very important in this context.